honk if you're horny, because we sure are. Beep, 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 beep. You're listening to America's most dissociative podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm in your garage, looking at your Toyota Corolla, steam coming out my ears, eyes popping out my head, tongue rolling like a curtain, going, awooga!
Ka-chow. It's Ben Sheets. And really, it's all about family.
Hello, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and when I grow up, I want to be a fire truck.
Oh man, this episode is starting so well, boys. For a little peek behind the curtain, this is like the first time we've recorded an episode in like 3 weeks, even though you've gotten that good content every week. But we're back in the same room together to talk about the exciting and sexy new film from Julia Ducornau, who brought you Raw. We're, of course, talking about Titane, starring Vincent Lindon and Agatha Roussey, and it's about a girl who fucks a car.
But really, it's all about family.
Really, in the end, it's all about family.
I mean, I guess, goddamn spoilers, but like,
She fucks the car like 5 minutes into the movie.
All cars are...
And yeah, the trailer does imply lots of cars and sexuality. That is.
I do want to say all car movies are about family.
Yes, it's true.
Required
and
by
fucking
law.
cars in some capacity. Even cars.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's no humans in the cars.
I mean,
universe,
you see
so you have
car
to make other cars
babies.
somehow.
Well,
so you just have to...
There aren't any humans when we enter the car universe.
Right.
But there were humans before.
Presumably.
Okay. Can we go ahead and start this podcast out? Let's just get it out of the way. Let's get all of my Cars theories out of the way, if we could.
Okay, now we're talking about Disney Pixar
car.
Cars.
Yeah, we need to.
Ka-chow.
It's going to come up at some point, and it might as well just start with it and get it, like, rip off the Band-Aid. Okay, here's the thing. I have a couple of points on Cars, right? I've been talking to some friends about this now. Okay.
Welcome to our horror podcast.
Yeah. Hey, no, Cars is a horror movie, all right? Let me explain.
All right, I'm listening.
Okay, here's the thing about Cars. And I'm sure
serious.
this theory has been touted around online or something or whatever, but I don't know. I haven't read it. But as far as I'm concerned, the Cars universe and Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive exist in the same universe.
Okay.
We're looking at a post-Man Maximum Overdrive where all the cars and electronics became sentient. They killed all of man,
and
except
at some point
for some.
Developed eyes and mouths.
Yes. They would, were as required by evolution. Sure. And Carvolution. Like we get the sequences in Cars where in Maximum Overdrive. See, that's how like similar they are. I get them mixed up. Where like the people are like having to gas up the trucks until they collapse because they don't understand that. So assumably that's what happened to Last of Man, right? But here's the thing, right? They still need the gas, right? So the last few remaining humans, in order to survive, were placed into cars. So like they are inside the cars. Still. But the cars have resorted to biofuel, if you get what I mean. So, like, every one of those cars in those movies... And now, there actually is, like, some incredible fan concept art of this. Of, like, a person, like, strapped up inside of a car with, like, all of their orifices, like, plugged into fucking Lightning McQueen.
So this sounds like Cars hentai.
It's, like, Geiger-esque. And, like, on the inside. Yeah, it's the Matrix, but, like, a portable Matrix. Where they all carry a person around for biofuel. Inside of Lightning McQueen and Tomater and, all the others is a man strapped in. Credit to the artist who made that. Like, look it up. You'll see it rules. It's a great piece of art. It's very similar to like the Fall Guys thing that has like the skeleton inside. A very similar vibe where there's just like a person like strapped up to this thing, subsisting off the interior of this of Lightning McQueen, and it just to me like it sums up the whole of the franchise. We also need to recognize now this is a funny online theory that there's a sequence in like one of the Cars movies where they have to like go through airport security, which
means that canonically 9/11
happened in the Cars universe. Right. So, which really, like, opens up a whole nother can of worms we don't need to go down. But
I would love to see what car-based Islamic terrorism is like.
I mean, car-based skyscrapers are just Carvana, right? Like,
you're right.
Wow.
Prescient.
Yeah.
Prescient.
It's true.
They were before their time.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk with like his weird parking garage thing he's trying to build that will probably never be made is like trying to usher in
Just
like the era.
Anything that Elon Musk.
Yeah, like usher
Says
in
he's
like
gonna
the era of the automotive man. So that's essentially my theory. But I also want to bring on another point that is equally horrifying. That in the Cars universe, now I've had a lot of discussions of this, and many people have disagreed with me. But as far as I'm concerned, I think it is pretty wild because like when we look at a car and we see a face on a car, we see the headlights as the eyes and the mouth. But in the Cars universe, the eyes are the windshield,
Right.
Which is just wrong. Now, granted, it needs to be the windshield because you need to cover up the fact that there's a person
nothing
inside of that
the
car, which is
right.
horrifying. So I get it. But also it leads to so many other implications. The worst one being that means the headlights are nipples. And I really, really don't like this.
I don't know about that.
No, hold on. I know.
In what anatomy are nipples above your mouth?
None, which is why it's horrifying, but hear me out. It is also canonically shown in the Cars universe. There is a sequence where Lightning McQueen is at the top of his game, and two lady cars show up, and they have the kind of headlights that flip up, or whatever, and they flip up their high beams at him and go, woo, like that, or whatever. Really awful joke, frankly, like especially in a kids movie. And Lightning McQueen says something along the lines of like, "I love my job." Really skeezy and awful. So yeah, he gets like literally flashed by these like two other cars, and like he gets gratification from it. So like whether or not like they serve as like biological nipples, they do serve as like culturally, they serve as titularly as nipples, which
Titularly, quite literally.
right. And of course, some people might say, well, but some cars have their nipples out all the time. Yes, some guys on beaches do as well. So like it still works, and it's horrifying, and I don't like it. So and again, yeah, nipples above the mouth, it's a big problem, and that's Cars. And now it's out.
I mean, I think your biofuel theory has a lot of weight. Like, I've asked myself, on a weekly basis, do cars eat? What do they eat?
People.
How do they eat?
Fluid. Interior. The food is already inside them. It's really horrible.
What happens when they run out of that fuel?
They get more.
Do they just have like a mass
People farm.
people?
Yeah.
Oh God!
Like the Matrix.
Yeah. That's probably what Tomater's job is before. He's like he's just like out, like on a people farm, towing people from farm to farm.
Can we talk about Titane?
It's
please?
time. No, we're done. We're done here. The Band-Aid's been ripped off. We can move into Titane or however you choose to pronounce it because it's French. There isn't a right way.
That's true. I think there objectively is a correct way to pronounce it.
Not to me.
I think it's. They say it once in the movie. I think it's Titane. But
I've been saying Titane.
Full disclosure, I looked it up before because I didn't want to look like a fool on this episode.
Well, that's no fun.
And it is Titane, but
Okay.
I was saying Titane.
I was saying Titane.
yeah, I've been saying Titane. It's French. We're not native French speakers. But this is the newest film from Julia Ducornau, who did Raw, which we talked about earlier this year. One of my favorite horror movies of the 2010s. I would say that the trailer for this movie was not particularly forthcoming, like what the movie's about. But it definitely set the tone in the regard that just like Raw, this is going to be hypersexual, extremely uncomfortable, and very unflinching from what it's trying to show you.
Yeah, and definitely something to do with
Uncompromising.
sexuality in cars.
In cars.
Because honestly, the trailer is a new favorite of mine in terms of not giving anything away about your film, but still giving you a full sense of what the movie is going to feel like.
Yeah, it's a vibes trailer, and I think it's the best way to do this kind of movie because
Yes.
as we get into talking about the plot, it's very weird.
Yeah, and I would say
it's hard to describe.
I would
too.
say the film even takes a very drastic narrative left turn that's
Yes.
not signaled in the trailer.
No, not
and
at
that's
all.
what I think the strength of the trailer is. It shows elements and aesthetics and even vibes, like you said, but it keeps the actual story plot side very vague.
And with that, man, spoilers be warned, because
Yeah.
this movie rules. If it is, I don't think it's still in theaters by the time we're putting this out. But man, if it
by the
is,
time this
go
episode
see
comes
it.
out, probably not. Maybe you might get lucky.
If you enjoy like films or like appreciate, enjoy might be the wrong word, but if you appreciate like films that like make you like deeply uncomfortable and unsettled, this is a masterclass.
If you have seen Raw and liked it, you will like this movie.
Yeah, and frankly, like it is really designed for like theater speaker systems and like big screen, just filling your vision with
If you like art house horror, you will definitely like this as well. This is so wild that it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes.
Yes, it did.
Because I think it's one of the most extreme, wild movies to ever win that. Like, normally it's like,
They tend to play a
serious
little safer.
dramas
Yeah.
and very emotionally driven movies. And while this movie is certainly emotionally driven in a lot of ways, it's way more fucking weird.
it's weird as fuck. One of the weirdest movies I've seen, frankly.
It's surreal. I think that, and this can start leading us into the plot a little bit, but my theory on this film is that very little of it is meant to be interpreted literally. I think
Yes.
I think that the movie as a whole is meant to be a sort of violent, dissociative hallucination by the protagonist.
and equal parts allegory.
Yes, for sure.
To sound hyper pretentious, but it is.
That's my point. Why it's not meant to be taken literally. Like I think she is. I think our protagonist, and I'll talk about like what I think is the definitive turning point where she like completely dissociates from reality.
Sure.
But I think there's a little bit of it from even the very beginning.
Sure.
But like I don't think this is a movie that you're supposed to go into and watch it and be like, this doesn't make sense because this couldn't happen. What's going on? Like
Let's make clear pretty early
it's
on.
like, it's
which is to its credit. So just please, if you haven't seen this film and this sounds like your kind of thing, and maybe even if it isn't, like just please watch it first. So much of the tension and journey is built on like the unexpected.
Yeah.
And like and this film is a tension movie, and so much of that is built around like just not knowing how something is going to play out. And God, yeah, please go watch this film. It's amazing.
Yeah, but like you said, Tease, like I feel like this is a very metaphor-heavy movie, and what I think works for me a little bit more than Raw with this one is it also hits the balance like Raw does of kind of realism, quote unquote, with surrealism.
Yeah.
It gives you very surreal elements and tries to intertwine it with very realistic approaches, intensely realistic kind of characterizations and stuff like that. And
Sure.
I think for me, it works here so well because the surreal elements are so pronounced and so intense that it doesn't stretch my suspension of disbelief because there's more of a distinction there. Where when Raw, like I feel like the distinction is more gray. Where
Yeah, sure.
I can see how that works for a lot of people, but for me it didn't always work.
Yeah. And what's so impressive is whenever there are those moments of like what could be described as like a psychotic break or whatever, like there is so much attention to detail and feeling and tactile sensation that even as profoundly odd as these events are, they still feel really tangible. You can reach out and touch them. Like, or they're really reaching out trying to touch you. And for
trying
me,
to
like,
run you over.
yeah, or through.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. If I had to sum up like how this movie made me feel, it made me feel really weird about Optimus Prime. Or sorry, it made me hot for Optimus Prime in a really uncomfortable way.
Optimus Prime.
Like I was like, ooh, Optimus Prime, and I was like, oh, and the feeling like wretched and guilty about it. Like this movie gets buck wild, man.
Much like Raw, it is an intensely erotic film.
Yeah.
But kind of like similarly to Raw, in a way where like the eroticism is mixed with something grotesque and taboo in a way that like you're not it's not supposed to be sexy.
It's not.
You know,
it definitely
but at the same time,
isn't.
it kind of is a little bit.
But that's why it's so uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? Is because like it's still like so dripping with sexuality,
Right.
That it, ooh, yeah, like, ugh.
I mean, honestly,
that
for
movie.
me, I think this movie is much less erotic than Raw.
God, I disagree.
because outside of the car sequence, there is a very pronounced distance of our main character to sexual experiences. And while there's definitely an exploration of themes of desire and things like that, and there is definitely sexually explicit content and nudity, I don't find it as explicitly sexual as
It's often
Raw.
objectifying, like a car, you know. Like,
I think it's kind of the inverse of Raw in the regard where like Raw gets progressively more erotic throughout the film, and Titane starts very erotic and gets progressively less so as the movie goes on.
well, and it turns you on and then contorts it, which is very cool. And again, by design, like this movie like does everything it can to activate you. Then it twists the knife, and it is truly subvertive. Truly.
Well, let's start talking about the story a little bit.
Let's get into details, yeah.
Get into some deets. So the film starts with our protagonist, Alexia, as a little girl. She's in the back seat of the car. Her dad's driving. She's being intensely annoying. She's like making car noises in the back seat, and she's like glaring at him.
She's matching the humming of the
car,
shift changes. Like whenever there's a
But what's funny about it is she's like glaring at her dad, like
So
in the rearview
intently
mirror, like while
focused.
she's doing it, like. And he gets frustrated, and at one point she takes her seatbelt off, and he like turns around and be like, "Put your fucking seatbelt back on," and spins out of control, hits the side, the wall on the highway. Cut to the hospital.
Well, don't forget in that shot too, we see like her head slam against the door from the outside.
Yes.
It's like, and there's like a really heavy impact, and
Yeah.
again, she's a child. It's a lot.
So we cut to the hospital. We see like her x-ray, and like we see her, and she's got like a big gnarly scar on the side of her head that hit the door. And you know, the doctor is like showing the x-ray, and they're saying like, yeah, we've put like a really like strong titanium plate into her skull because it was busted the fuck open. Hence the title, Titane, French for titanium. But immediately after that, they're leaving the hospital. She walks out to the car, and the first thing she does is like hugs it and like starts like kissing the window. Jump forward in time.
Well, before we jump past that moment,
Yeah, let's
like.
Well, it sets up the next part of the film very well.
Well,
sure
I
does.
think it's a good metaphor, like you said, for kind of people's relationship with trauma.
Yeah.
You know, this was a traumatic event, and she's immediately going back to it and kind of fixating on it,
Yeah.
as trauma sometimes happens to emphasize.
Well, and as we see through the rest of the film, that trauma has irreparably changed her, has like set her on the course of her life. Because we jump forward to present day after that. When she's a fully grown woman. I think at one point they say she's like 30 or 32 or something like that. This scene reminded me very much of the party scene in Raw, where they do like the single like prolonged take
yeah.
like throughout the whole party. They do the exact same thing here, following her as she walks into like this car show, and it takes you around like the whole exhibition, and there's like girls dancing on like strippers like dancing on the cars and stuff. And it comes back around, and we see her now unclothed, and she is one of these erotic auto show dancers, and she's like licking the hood of the car and like humping it and stuff like that. Very sexy.
Well, it's like it's neat because like the other strippers are like they're dancing on the cars. They're being sexual for men on cars.
Right.
Her dancing style is more like she's sexual for the car. She's trying, and like it's almost like her secret. Like the movie almost like treats it like her secret power because like all the men come around to her because like she's being the most overt, right? And like and it's different. It's like there's such a new level of kink to it because like it's like clear like she wants the car.
She's truly giving Lightning McQueen a lap dance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and to be introduced to this like right immediately after we see like the accident, and the first thing she does is go out and like kiss the car as like a child. We've seen like, okay, so from that accident happening, you know, when she's prepubescent, like it has crossed some wires in her head where hot wired, hot wheeled, where she as she has grown up and like been through puberty and developed a sense of sexuality, that those wires have been crossed with how she feels about cars. So she has chained her sexuality to automobiles,
which reminded me immediately of it was doing the rounds a couple years ago, probably like five or 6 years ago, of these clips from like the TLC channel of these people who like were dating their car.
My Strange Addiction,
That's
episode
the one.
where the dude is like, he's dating his car,
and also the person who is in love with a roller coaster and like and not riding the roller coaster and traditionally, but like. Is like caressing like one of the structural supports of it and like earnestly like sees it as a lover.
Yeah.
Really something else. I'm not necessarily like coming from a position of authority to comment on that sort of thing, but it was definitely what I was reminded of is these people who like who really see these like inanimate objects as like sources of affection. And hey, you know what? That coaster, it's never going to cheat on you. That car, it's it's never going to leave you. I mean, unless it gets impounded or something.
Yeah,
but like,
I mean, well, that's the problem with anthropomorphizing inanimate objects is they won't quote unquote cheat on you until you project that they're cheating on you onto them. You're already projecting everything onto them as it is.
Yeah,
so
sure,
like,
why not?
They can do whatever the fuck like your brain wants them to.
But
like,
I mean, I do understand though, like a perspective of like needing like a form of emotional support, like from like having whatever other kinds of like trauma in your life, like there being a sense of security in being able to project everything you need onto this thing, like this inanimate thing, like it's you're safe. It can never hurt you.
I see a most direct relation, obviously, to the David Cronenberg movie Crash.
I was going to bring that up too,
wires get crossed and people get sexually attracted to being in a car crash.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is very similar to Titane, where this trauma brings an emotional response to an otherwise distant person.
Yeah.
Our main character in this film is obviously very cold and very distant with people.
Yeah. I mean, we see, shortly after that, like, she doesn't have a good relationship with her parents either. Like, she lives at home with them, but, like, her dad particularly is very cold to her, probably always has been. Like, we kind of see that they don't seem to like each other very much in that intro scene. So, like, the whole movie is Alexia, like,
more on
seeking connection with anybody. And I think that, we'll start getting into when she starts killing people, which happens very shortly after this. And I think that every time that happens, it's because she recognizes that she's not, quote unquote, normal, in the sense that, like, she has this attraction to vehicles and she wants to have a connection with humans, but every time she tries to have a connection with a human being, she gets freaked out and panics and then kills that person. Like, it happens several times in, like, the first third of the movie.
Yeah, and I think that's a very direct metaphor for trauma. Like, every time we see her get close to someone, we see the residual effects of cars, very literally, and we'll talk about that later. But that is just a recurring motif, that we see those elements and you're pushing down the brake on emotional closeness
Yes.
because of
You're
these
pulling the e-brake on
lasting
it.
effects. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, after the car show, we see that she's, like, showering with the other dancers. She, like, starts to sort of flirt with one of these other girls who is our protagonist from Raw.
Same actress?
Same actress and same name. She introduces herself as Justine, which is that actress's character's name in Raw. I don't think they're supposed to be the same character, but I do think that's a fun little callback.
More on that in a moment. I have more things.
But yeah, there's this sort of funny moment where Alexia gets her hair caught in Justine's nipple piercing, and there's like they spend like 2 minutes like trying to disentangle it.
Did you say hilarious?
It's kind of funny.
It is kind of funny.
I think it's kind of funny.
I was so uncomfortable.
I mean, it's uncomfortable because it goes on for so long and like it's painful, but like it feels like kind of like a meet cute moment because they're like like a weird
I read that differently.
Like a weird sort of perverse meet cute because like they're flirting and like they go on a date later in the movie. So like they're like flirting and it's like, oh shit, oh fuck, I got my hair caught in your nipple piece. Oh shit, okay, oh wait, nope, this is bad. Ow, this really hurts. Like it's kind of absurd.
The way I saw it is like the our protagonist from Raw, like the hair is caught like in her nipple piercing, and I thought like from her perspective, like she was just like, oh shit. Whereas, like, Alexia, she just didn't seem to care, which had to be really uncomfortable.
Well, I mean,
like,
Alexia
scenario.
has a hard time connecting with people. So
right. Well, I mean, of course. So, like the way, like, yeah, she just, like, handles the whole situation, it, like, had me, like, really nervous. Like, the whole time.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing with this film. Like, I did find it funny as well. And I think a lot of this film is very, very, like, pitch black comedy. Yeah, in a lot of aspects.
It has a lot of funny moments in, like, really darkly absurd ways.
And I think that's probably, like, the way it's meant to be read. I think you're right about that. It's not how I read it, though.
Yeah.
It really, really got me. And I think, too, because, like, I was just so primed for, like, some of the sequences in Raw. But it also had me, too. I was talking to Ben about this after we left the movie theater. I was wondering, like, is she the same actress who played her sister in Raw?
She's not.
And she's not. I looked it up. She's not. But her sister's name in Raw, unless I got is Alexia.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, that's right.
Weird. And then here's the thing. I definitely think that's by design. Because going back to like the point we established with the father, the movie starts with like her as a child, like seemingly angry at her father.
Yeah.
Over something. There's a bit where she feels uncomfortable at the house later, and the dad looks at her.
Yeah.
And the dad is like kind of trying to perform it clinically.
He seems to be a doctor. He's examining her. Mm-hmm. She has abdominal pain. And
she doesn't want anything to do with it. There are many other themes throughout the film we'll build on to do with fatherhood. This movie has
the second half of the movie.
This movie has a lot of incestuous connotations.
Sure.
Like, and I think one of the big factors there is like this sequence that we've encountered so far with like the trauma of like the car crash and like her wires being crossed. I think can also be a metaphor or even implied like in this reality that she was molested like by her father. There is a lot of movement towards that, and it also like brings some different light to how she like handles everything with her parents later, and again like the aspects of like fatherhood as it carries on, those wires being crossed as well. But we'll dive into that as we continue going. But I did want to like bring that theme up now.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be recurring.
Well, after as she's leaving the auto show, she's accosted by a fan who wants an autograph. As she's getting into her car, he asks her for like a kiss or something, and she like rolls down her window a little bit, and then he sort of like forces himself on her.
Well, he makes it really clear, like, I've been following you. Like, he's definitely set up, like, he's been stalking her.
Yeah, for sure. He sort of like forces a kiss on her, but then she seems to like get into it kind of. What I read that is like she's like, okay, this is a connection with a human, like I'm gonna try to go for it or whatever. Like she seems to like be sort of trying to earnestly make out with him for a few seconds, but then like, you know, there's the snap in her head, and she takes out the chopstick that she has holding her hair up and stabs him in the ear.
Interesting. That's not exactly how I read. I think that's a valid read. It might even be like the intent. But
I think the reason that I think that it's that is because she does the same thing with Justine a
Later.
little.
Well, I think I read it in a similar way, mostly because right after it, she gets herself to sexual release.
With the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how I saw it was the whole event is like forced on her. The guy goes in for a kiss and he grabs her like around the back of the neck. And like the window is down, he has a hold on her. At that point she cannot get away. And
but she resists a little bit at first and then stops resisting.
But I see that it like can very much so also be stopping resisting so that she can get in close enough to defend herself.
I don't think the two have to be mutually exclusive.
They're not.
Though. Like
Absolutely.
I think your read on that is correct. Like she's in a position where she can't really resist, but there does seem to be a moment where the way that I read her body language is like, okay, this is happening, let's go for this. And then very quickly is like, you know what, nope, nah. And
I read it as like, this is happening, I need to sell this.
What reinforces that for me, that scene stripped of context, I agree with you, but what reinforces that for me is after that, like how hard she tries to like make an intimate connection with other people, and it always ends in the same result. With people who are not trying to like force themselves on her or anything. She reacts the exact same way, but she is initiating it to a degree. She's trying to say, like, I need to make this intimate connection with another human being, but every time she tries, her brain, like, shuts down, she goes into a panic, and she reacts by killing them.
Well, I saw this event as, like, sort of jump-starting that. Up until this point, we haven't necessarily seen that happen in that capacity.
Right. And
this is the event that kicks off, like, all that previous trauma. Where, like, she has no choice but to defend herself, and now, like that sense of, like, connection in people is irreparably severed.
I mean, to me, it didn't seem like this was the first person she'd killed.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of vague, but I also sort of got that impression. Just the way that she responds to actually, like, killing him, like, she's kind of just like, oh shit, I gotta clean this up, but she doesn't seem as in shock as you would think somebody would be for their first time.
And I think there's because, like, she's already dissociated of missing people in this film that kind of implies that she might be responsible for some of those.
Potentially, yeah. We'll circle back around to that when we get to the change in the movie, because there are important details there. Mm-hmm. But after this, after she kills him, she goes back into the warehouse to shower again, to get cleaned up, and she hears this banging on the door to, like, the locker room. This, like, really heavy slamming, repetitive banging. She goes, looks out the door. There's nothing there except for the car she was dancing on in the show.
Lights on,
yeah. And she goes and she gets into the back seat, and the car starts, like, rocking and bumping on, like, hydraulics and shit. And we do get one important cut to her inside the car alone, which is important because it means that there's not somebody in the car who she is having sex with. She is having sex with the car. Oh, it is.
Oh, it's implicit.
It is, yes. It is.
And explicit.
It is explicit that she is having sex with the car, not a person inside the car.
Let's talk about, like, the frame.
It's kind of hot.
It's powerfully hot. Dude, like, I activated. Like, whoa. This is exhibit A, B through Z, like, of what I meant earlier in this film. Okay, so you explained the events, but let me explain, like, the dressing or the dripping in this case. Like, she's showering. Also, like, in the previous scene where she'd killed the guy with her her hair. What's the term for that?
Knitting needle.
Yeah, it's a knitting needle or a chopstick or something. Like it's for holding a hair bun together.
Yeah, and a hair spike. But like when she does, like he's over the back of her shoulder at that point, and like his eyes roll into the back of her head, and he's like vomiting up like white bile.
Yeah, he's like
all over her
he's,
shoulder,
like,
and like
at the mouth,
so she's covered in like his fluids. And when like she deals with him and whatnot, and so then like she showers it all off. And she's still like naked in the shower when there's like the heavy slamming on the door. And when she walks out, like she's still like wearing nothing and like dripping. And there's this like incredible shot of like her walking towards the car, like in silhouette by the headlights, like water dripping along the ground, is like the engine is like revving sexually. And
it's very erotic.
The camera is like very low, so the car is like made to feel like particularly like domineering. And like she enters the car, and then like the car enters her. Like it's but as the car begins to like bounce on hydraulics, like it is comedic. Like
it's like the Eddie Guerrero car.
You know what it reminded me of?
Like a Cholo car.
Yeah. It reminded me of the bit in Watchmen, like where like Night Owl hits the flamethrower jet by accident, and like at the same time like they're like climaxing, like the flame jet goes off.
Very on the nose.
Very much so. But like as the car is like rising off the ground, it's like leaping so much on hydraulics. Like it's so heavy.
It's extremely
the engine revving is like so rich and overpowering and growling. It's a Jaguar, right? Like it's bestial. And we cut to the shot of her in the car where her hands are bound on the other side by the seat belts, like holding herself in, like as she's just like bouncing up, like, oh my God, wild shit. And it's very clear, like she's like in like excruciating ecstasy, like during this, like it is very clear, like she is just being fucked by this machine. It's heavy, man. It's really heavy.
Yeah. Well, I want to compare it to, there's this movie a few years back, Ridley Scott movie, The Counselor. I don't know if either of you ever saw it.
Heard of it.
That.
It was pretty bad.
Is that the one with Matthew McConaughey?
Yes. But in that movie, Cameron Diaz fucks a car, and she is just humping the shit out of it.
Oh, that's the one based off the Cormac McCarthy book, right?
Yep.
Okay, I remember the previews for that
and
movie.
The reason why that doesn't work where this does work, I think, comes down to framing and implication. I think the framing of it, we see her ecstasy through the sunroof of the car. We see details rather than just seeing, Cameron Diaz on the hood of the car humping the shit out of it. Like, it's so much more erotic in what is implied.
But yeah, and what's crazy too is like it is very explicit, but in the same breath, nothing below the waist.
No,
right?
I mean
we don't know the technical details.
Well,
like
again,
of this like alien intercourse or whatever. Like, we don't know how that rolls, which is way worse, frankly.
Well, also because I don't think it's supposed to be taken literally. I don't think this is one of the aspects of the film.
Oh no, she's not
supposed to read as literally. That's like
the car has not come to life. And she's not,
I will say,
but
we know
literal.
that car has a stick shift.
Sure, but she's in the back seat, right? But like she's in the back seat, and like all the rest. Like the point is like there's no like physical like implication like within like the inner workings of a car that would make sense there. It feels like the scene in Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Yes,
I think this movie like is a double feature. Like this movie would double feature very well with like any of the Tetsuo
I could
films.
See that. Or Crash.
And it's you whether like we don't see anything below the waist, but like what's forced into my imagery is like some Tetsuo shit. Like and it's worse because it's heavier to me because it's all implied. Point is, TLDR, some heavy shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're pretty good ways into the podcast already, so there's no reason to gloss over it because we'll be talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
The car gets her pregnant.
Yep.
That is like a big central impetus of the film.
An impregnatus?
Ooh.
That's awful. I hate that. Yeah, I regret everything.
Yeah, the car gets her pregnant, and that is something that she is struggling with through the remainder of the film in, you know, exceedingly difficult and grotesque ways once we get to the second half of the film, which we should work our way into here shortly. But yes, after this scene, you know, this is still pretty much right at the beginning of the movie when this happens. Then we see like her little date with Justine, where she similarly freaks out while, you know, they're like making out, and kills her the exact same way with the knitting needle or chopstick or whatever through the ear. But then it's not enough to just kill Justine. Then she has to cover it up by murdering all of Justine's roommates.
It is so funny.
That scene is incredible, but I don't want to gloss over the relationship with Justine too much. I think there's some very intense elements of it. I think the pulling of her nipple is one of the most cringe-inducing elements I've seen in a movie in a while.
She like bites it.
Yeah. And just stretches it with her teeth. And what's so interesting to me is, you know, after we see them make out for the first time, one of the next scenes we see is Alexia in the bathroom, and she is trying to abort herself because she realizes she's pregnant, and she's like leaking motor oil
from between her legs. Yeah, that's how she knew. Well, I mean, she sees like a baby bump starting to develop, but also like, yeah, she continues to find like black motor oil between her legs.
For a good portion of the film, like the baby bump can almost be read as like her like kind of like forcing out her stomach. You know, like there's a little like strain in her back whenever she looks at it, and it feels like, for a while I was thinking like it's in her head, you know, like, I mean, clearly regardless it is, sure, yes, but it's really neat how that is set up to be implied, because like even like the for like a large portion of the film when she starts like binding herself to quote hide it, like it feels like it could be very well literally read as it's just how she perceives that she's
that's
like,
the
pregnant.
thing. It's like we do see her like very forcefully binding down her stomach and her breasts throughout the movie. So like, yeah, there's something to be said for that, but we really only ever see like how pregnant she is like when she's alone, like in her room or in the bathroom or something, like looking at herself. Like throughout the rest of the movie, whenever like even towards the end of the movie, and like, yes, she's binding herself, but when she's around other people, she doesn't look pregnant. And
which could be said for the binding. We don't really know.
Right. It's
which is why it works.
Yeah.
It feels more like a metaphor to me, again, of the trauma and her relation with trauma and connecting with people. I mean, we keep seeing throughout the film that come up in scenes right after she has connection with people and closeness with people.
It's always brought up at the same time.
Yeah. It kind of bounces back and forth because I think she's dealing with those things every time she connects to someone. And I think that's a great example in the scene with Justine, you know, like when she starts feeling close, that is emphasized. And
yeah, it's like every time she tries to be, again, quote unquote normal, like, you know, I'm not trying to bash on quote unquote non-normal or whatever, but like it's every time that she's trying to be normal and make a human connection that like the presence of like the car baby or like the sexual arousal towards cars like comes to the forefront the most. It's like every time she tries to connect with a human being, her mental illness or whatever inserts itself to make sure that she cannot do that.
Her trauma,
yeah.
Let's go back to the scene where she starts killing the whole household. Because honestly, it's probably my favorite scene in any movie this year so far. I think it's just incredibly well done and a perfect blend of like horrifyingly grotesque and visceral and really funny. Because, you know, it's almost a comedy of errors in that like she kills Justine and then a roommate appears like, around the corner.
Yeah. And well, it's like every time she kills one of them, she thinks she's killed everybody in the house.
And we
then
do too, yeah.
And then another one appears. It's like, oh, fuck. So by the end of it, she's killed like 4 or 5 people in this house.
It's timed like a fucking symphony. It's such a roller coaster of emotions. Like, it's so well paced. Where we're constantly like led into like the depths of despair and gratuity as she like has to murder another one of these roommates. And like brutally, and we take in all of their despair, and then it's immediately led back to her perspective where she's just like exhausted by this, and then another roommate makes their appearance.
Right at the end of that sequence, there is an interesting tell, I think. And one of the roommates is like pulling her down the stairs, and Alexia falls down the stairs and hits her head really hard against the wall. And early at the beginning of the movie, when they're first putting in the plate, they say, it's a titanium plate and she'll be fine as long as she doesn't like hit her head really hard.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the next instance of severe head trauma after that is when I think it completely enters the world of hallucination and fabrication after that.
Really, I think that's the moment for me. But
that is I think that is an important step. But I'll work us to the next one, and I'll explain why I think that's the specific one. So after she kills Justine and everybody in the house, she goes home and she tries to burn her clothes that are covered in blood in like a trash can in the basement. And it gets out of control, starts burning the rest of the house. There's this really great scene where like she goes upstairs and like looks in her parents' bedroom, and like her dad is awake, like watching TV, and she just like takes the key out of the door on his side and just like closes the door and locks it. And leaves, and leaves her parents to burn to death in the house. That very much feels like I've just killed 5 other people, and I've started a fire in my house that is getting out of control. I hate my parents anyway, so might as well.
I gotta say, what kind of bullshit French architecture lets you lock a bedroom door from the outside?
As somebody who's spent a fair amount of time in Europe, that is not just France. That is a lot of buildings in Europe, is that you have a physical key in the doors instead of like just the locks that we have on our doors, and you can take it out and use it on either side of the door. Very common. It feels antiquated, but I guess it's still a thing. It's still a thing. But yes, so she then goes on the run because obviously she has just killed a shitload of people.
She's out on the lam, Burgini.
Oh, damn. So I think she hitchhikes down to like Marseille or something like that. And she is in like a train station and sees like a police sketch of herself like on like a jumbotron, and is like, okay, I have to disguise myself. So she goes into a bathroom and cuts off all of her hair, and then to further disguise herself, she decides to break her nose.
Oh my god!
Which is where I think that that's the moment where it truly separates reality from fabrication, because it is another moment of head trauma, because she breaks her nose by slamming her face into like a sink in the bathroom.
She also physically becomes another person. So visually, the metaphor carries.
Exactly. Then that's the reason, because it hard cuts from her slamming her face into the sink to our new character Vincent.
The transformation is complete.
It's smash cuts from there to introduce this character who we have not henceforth seen in this movie, and he's at a police station and they're telling him like, hey, we found your son who's been missing for like 20 years or whatever, and he looks in the room and it is Alexia with all her hair shaved off and like her face busted.
It's absolutely demented, because like before we see Alexia make this transformation of sorts, she sees, on a little, screen,
yes,
in the train station, airport, whatever it is, of like this missing child, as like a rendering of what he would
They've-
look like today.
Yep, there are multiple kids who have been missing for like decades, and they show them like aged up. Like, here's what we think they would look like today. And so like that's why I think that's the dissociative break right there, because it's after she's seen that. We've seen the stuff of like Adrian on the TV before, so like it's already been in her head. But it's from there that we're introduced to Vincent, who is the father of one of these boys who's been missing. And at this point, Alexia has been picked up by the police. We don't know why. They obviously don't think she's Alexia, because they're not, like, charging her with murdering all of these people. They think that, oh, it's this kid who's been missing for 20 years, and they even say to Vincent, like, hey, like, is this your, like, we'll do DNA tests, like, to be sure. And he's like, nonsense, like, you think I wouldn't recognize my own son? And he takes Alexia home, and the rest of the movie is like him trying to imprint his missing and dead son onto Alexia, and her trying to take on that persona because it's the most loved by another human being she's ever been.
And from a position of platonic love.
Yes.
As well. And that, which changes the whole scenario. But I do have something I want to kind of come back around to, where, Ben, you identified, like, her transition point as being at the house.
Yeah.
Like, first. I think it highlights one of the greater successes of this film, that every event is given such tension and weight that it feels like a catalyst of some kind. And I think there's an epiphany in every single scene. So I think there's credence. You can give every one of those scenes that same credence.
I think she's breaking the whole time. I think she's in the process of breaking the whole time. Like, obviously, like we've said,
in a different way.
She doesn't literally fuck like a living car and get impregnated by it.
Sure.
Like, this is all her sort of spiraling out of control and reaching this point where she dissociates entirely and invents a completely new life for herself, which is why I think that it's at that moment that they introduce Vincent and bring in this whole other aspect to the story. I think that is the rest of the film from that point on, I think, is entirely in her head. I think the whole thing is. And, you know, maybe not the whole thing, but, like, I think that's, like, yeah, she slams her face into that sink, and there is, like, that's her invention of this boy who I've seen on the news, like, his dad's looking for him. What if his dad found me, and then I was his son, and, like, all of this. Like, it's...
You know, if you think about it, it's basically the same plot line as Dear Evan Hansen.
Exactly. It's the exact same plot line.
Yeah,
but this is where this whole part is where you mentioned at the beginning, Ben, that the film takes a really dramatic left turn and becomes something completely different.
Yeah. Becomes about family.
It becomes about family. Well, yeah,
about family.
It stops being about, like, her murder rampage, which I thought the whole film was going to be about, frankly. And then it's just like, well, now she's been as like a 30-year-old woman, she's been quote unquote adopted by this, like, heavily damaged and broken man who has been unable to accept the loss of his son for like 2 decades, to the point that I think he knows from the moment he sees her in the police station, like, that's not his son. But he's so desperate.
Well, there's extreme levels of denial.
Yes,
you know?
he's so desperate to have his son back that it doesn't matter that this isn't literally his son. This can be his son. Mm-hmm. You know?
Well, and too, like, it's later implied that, like, his son is definitively dead.
Probably, yeah.
Like his son was never lost or ran away. You know, like that his son died, and it's just his like, that's how I read it. Like, and that, like, that's his means.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that, like, after 20 years, like, yeah, his son is probably dead. I don't think there's anything in the film to, like, heavily suggest that his son, like, died in an accident or something, or, like, how the son died. But the son has been missing for decades. Like, the odds of him being alive are, like, basically nil.
Yeah.
So it's Vincent's attempt to cope with that loss. And it's like he's just like going through like a horrible midlife crisis in general. Like he's a firefighter. He's coping with not only the loss of his son that he's never been able to get over, but he's coping with his aging. We see him injecting himself with steroids multiple times, like juicing like crazy, and then like crying because he can't do as many pull-ups as he used to be able to do, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I love that shot of like him, and they use it in the trailer, like of him like looking into the mirror, like beefing himself, like straining to like beef himself up. Like, and there's like three, like it's like a triple mirror, so like we get like these like shots of three of them from around the back.
I mean, the trailer is so vague. Like, I went into it thinking that like he was like a killer. That he like kidnapped her or something. Well, and because I was thinking about it too, because like he is heavily featured,
or like a killer duo.
He is like heavily featured in the trailer, and like throughout the beginning of the movie, like we're seeing on the news constantly, like there's these children that have been missing for years. So I thought that when he was first introduced, I thought that he was like the one who, he was like a serial killer.
It was like a killer versus killer thing. Yeah,
that he had been like killing these kids for all these years. And I mean, I guess maybe, but yeah, it's possible.
I don't see that as implied.
I don't think so.
No, yeah.
He doesn't.
He's not a killer.
He doesn't seem like a malicious force. Just like
it seems like it seems like he's a serial adopting people as his son-er and letting them run away-er. Like,
yeah, maybe
it's probably what I would perceive as.
He's a deeply damaged, grieving individual in a way that Alexia can relate to because she is the same.
Yeah. And I think what makes that dynamic work so well for me is like the establishment of Alexia as like a serial killing sociopath, essentially, in the first half of the film creates a sort of tension where like the relationship between the two at first feels very opportunistic for Alexia, in that like this is a disguise to keep her away from the cops, and whenever she has the moment she's going to run away from this situation and go somewhere else. And
she tries to.
And she does. When that moment presents itself, she does, and then very quickly is like, we should also mention that like this film is not very dialogue heavy. There's actually like quite long periods of like very little talking,
because it knows perfectly how to show and not tell.
Well, exactly, because it's like we can intuit all of these things that we're saying without being told. It's like, yeah, she does at one point like run away. It's like, I gotta get away from this weirdo who thinks that I'm his son. And then like very quickly, like she's not even out of the house yet, she's not even out of the building yet, and she like stops and comes back. It was like, yeah, this dude is a fucking weirdo. Like, he's treating me like I'm his son, even though he knows I'm not. But also, like, this is probably the best I've ever been treated by, like, another human being. Well, this is the most I've ever been loved before.
What's so interesting about that is she runs away after the scene where she tries to kill him.
Yeah, that's right.
You know? She has a moment, you know, where they're together and she pulls out the knitting needle and goes at him and tries to stab him, and it turns into a bit of a wrestling match of sorts. I love
that scene.
And well, I think what's so fascinating about it is, you know, the situation is read in two very different ways depending on what character you're looking at. And I think the dynamic in that whole scene is so fascinating because you know, the father sees it very much as kind of a fraternal thing.
Yeah.
And doesn't feel the danger.
It's like, oh, yeah, you're just wrestling with my son like I do. Like you do, you know? Just some good old-fashioned Greco-Roman son tussling.
Well, you know, like, and they pull out the spike, you know, like, and try it, like openly as well, like, later. And even still, like, you know, like, he doesn't treat it with, like, animosity. You know, like, he treats it like in almost like a fatherly, like a very like alpha fathery kind of way, where, you know, it's like really this, you know, like, come on, like, throw some punches.
He's a macho guy, like he's a fire, he's the captain of the fire brigade, you know, like that's why he's juicing.
He's the fireman leader.
He's trying to like he's trying to regain like his lost sort of alpha status that is, you know, decaying as he gets older. And what a really nice moment too is like later she does have like a moment where she could legitimately kill him, where he's in like a vulnerable position because he like ODs on his steroids, kind of like he takes too much. And she like finds him like in a stupor in the bathroom, and like if she wanted to kill him, that would be the time to do it, right? I mean, you get the impression too that like he's maybe like trying to kill himself too, like maybe that's why he took more steroids than he should have.
Inadvertently or not.
It's a self-destructive thing.
Exactly.
But that ends with that scene ends with her, you know, sort of like taking care of him, like holding him on the bathroom floor, and like she calls him dad. Like that's the moment where she like decides to fully assume the role of his son.
Well, we should make clear that's the first time she speaks to him. Up until then,
that is correct. That's a very good point.
She stays completely silent around him, obviously because she is pretending. So she didn't want her voice to be a giveaway per se, and that's the point where she realizes, you know,
he doesn't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean,
she doesn't care either.
She doesn't care
at that point.
And the moment that we know for a fact that he doesn't care either, like he definitively knows that she is not his son and doesn't care, is like he walks in on her like in the bathroom later with like
binding.
Yeah, when like trying to bind down her at this point like very pregnant belly, and like she's obviously topless, so like he can see that she's a woman, and he doesn't say anything about it at all, except for he says like, no matter who you are, you're my son and I'll always love you. And another thing too, like another like really nice little detail I noticed, this is kind of jumping around a little bit, but at that same scene he like puts like shaving cream on her face and like starts to shave her. He's like, we'll help it grow in. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but like after that, like in the last couple of scenes, this is close to the end, like she's got a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow like on her upper lip. Like she's like growing a mustache a little bit. And that's another reason why I think like the whole fucking thing is in her head. It's like she's like willing this transformation into being, kind of.
Yeah, and it's great too, because again, like teaching your son how to shave is like such like a fundamental like trope or aspect of like being a dad.
Sure, and the kid went missing when he was like 10, so it would have been before, you know, he could like teach his son to shave.
Yeah, so he's trying to have those moments,
right?
You know, like that were taken from him, and
it's so like the turn that this movie takes is so weird. Like it's still like really kind of like dark and disturbing and weird, but also like very touching, like multiple times.
And that's like the seat of the tension, right? Like that it somehow like finds these moments with this person who's like killed, like massacred, you know, like a group of people at this point. It still manages to like rope us in back in with them, like even after they've disfigured themselves and all the rest of it, you know, where like your tropey shitty films would like make it like, oh, now because physically they're the monster now. That's actually sort of when they become the most like passive and open. You know, it's like they become this, like, they take on this, like, strange role.
Yeah.
It works for many reasons, but on a slasher gratification aspect, it works because by that point in the film, she's killed as many people as, like, any odd Jason. Like,
yeah, they rack up the entire body count of the film in, like, the first 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, and then after that it just becomes something totally different. But there's always that tension of like that implied threat of violence like hanging over every scene, because like we've seen what Alexia is capable of in the rest of the movie, and even though she never follows through on any of that in the rest of the movie, it's like it's always there. It's like she could fucking snap and start killing people again at any moment.
I think a great example of that is the firefighter who realizes, you know,
the jealous firefighter who like is like wants to be the son or whatever, and then like he brings in this stranger like, oh, here's my son, he's gonna be, you know, he's gonna be like the new chief someday or whatever.
And it's that patriarchal thing, you know, where it's like, you know, you see like the chief is your father, and like eventually at some point like the chief will allow you to become like the head of the firefighter family.
Yeah,
you know.
The scene where he figures it out is so funny because he's looking on his phone phone and he sees a police sketch and he looks up and looks down.
And, like,
he's
it's just her.
Yeah. Like, oh. I also want to mention the scene right before that where they go to help the old man who's had a heart attack.
The guy who's OD'd on heroin.
Yeah.
And and then his mom, like, starts having a heart attack, like, while they're trying to...
So funny.
Oh my god, yeah. Just another, like, comedy of errors. Like,
Yeah.
Just one, like, horrible event.
But it's like
great.
at the same time, it's another kind of like weird, touching moment because like it is the
He's teaching a lesson.
well, yeah, he's talking Alexia through it, like he's teaching his son,
Macarena. Macarena,
yeah, exactly the Macarena, oh, I forgot
which is a
about
thing,
that.
like EMTs
Yeah.
do. Like I have a buddy who is like an EMT for a while, and he was saying like that's how you learn it, is like doing the Macarena. So I knew that going into the film. So when they started doing it, and they sing out the whole process of it, like it's really drawn out. Like he's just trying to like resuscitate this person, and then he says to the younger guy like, okay, you take over.
Well, and like
he's like directing the whole thing.
Vincent's very
What a scene.
bent on resuscitating the kid because like the guy's mom is there, like she's the one who called it in, so like he sees the parallel, like the loss of a child, and like it sends the mom into like cardiac arrest, like losing the son. So like Vincent's like he sees the parallel but with himself and is like, no, I gotta like save these people. And I don't think we really find out whether they're saved or not. Like, it kind of just cuts to the next scene, right? Like, it's been a couple weeks since I saw this movie.
And it shows, too, like, in a cool way, like, the importance of giving people, like, who've had to deal with something responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like that can be really, like, and again, I'm not really speaking from a position of authority on this. But like, from what I understand, like it can be really helpful to give people like tasks and like things to do when they're dealing with something, because it gives them
something
agency.
to focus on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something to focus on.
To distract them.
And, and like when it comes to like looking after someone or like looking after pets, it helps them like gives them agency over looking after themselves where they might not be able to. And it is the ultimate version of that. Like she's having to like save a life. Talk about the ultimate distraction. Like, and like the way like, he orchestrates the whole thing as a lesson, like in the moment, is wild. I gotta say, like if y'all hadn't brought up that scene, I would have almost forgotten about it. And now like we're talking about it, I can't imagine how. And it's just that this movie, like there are just so many moments like this that are so powerful and weighted and contextually like heavy and can be broken down.
Every scene,
whereas, like,
every scene in this movie is important, and we're talking about a lot of them in broad strokes
because we have to. Yeah, like
there's not enough time.
We're gonna be here all day
every
otherwise.
Scene,
But like each one of these scenes holds the weight of the one waxing scene in Raw. That scene, for me, it was like watching that scene for 2 hours. And like that's like to me, like that's the peak of that film. And I adored that film. I think I gave it a 5. It's the peak of that film for me. And for this film, like it was able to maintain that for the entirety of the film. And I didn't think that was possible. Like I would feel at some point I would be worn out or worn down. And I was pretty like exhausted by the end of this film. But it does such a good job of holding that tension and giving away at just the right time, using just the right amount of black comedy to pull you back in, just to put you on edge. And I just truly like masterclass. I'm just so like floored by like how fucking good the craftsmanship of like the making of this film is from every angle: writing, direction, acting, across the board. And again, like too, when it comes to like motifs and themes and allegory, I'm sorry. This is stuff I should be like rating it at the end. I think you already know, but we have more to discuss.
We're pretty close. I think we just really need to talk about the end of the movie.
Can we talk about the fire truck dancing
fire truck
scene?
dance.
Yes,
fire truck dance.
that's the other.
We
that's
cannot
the
not talk
scene.
about that. We have to. Oh man.
Yeah, so like we see that a couple of times, like the fire brigade have like these like little rave dance parties at the fire station.
Very French of them.
Very French. Very, very French.
Very gay, but not intended as so.
Oh, well, I mean, that's just the life of a fireman, right? Like, powerfully homoerotic.
Yeah. But they, at the end of one of these, Alexia kind of loses a little bit of control of herself and sort of like reverts back to her old personality to a degree and starts like sexy dancing like on top of one of the fire trucks, just like in front of the whole fire brigade, who at this point all of them believe that like she is the captain's son. And then she like gets on top of the fire truck and just starts
like reverts to her old self, and she does like the same kind of dance.
Yeah, like very feminine, like very erotic, and it's like I think like the music is even off at this point, isn't it?
Yeah,
she's just like up there dancing, and like the whole fucking fire brigade is just like watches like, what the fuck is going on?
It is
here?
amazing, like how at first they think it's funny because like it's like, oh haha, like he's doing like a lady dance, and then suddenly
she
like
gets really into it,
and they're all like just perfectly confused, like it's like, wait, this is kind of hot. What?
Wait,
like,
I shouldn't be turned on.
Be turned on by this. What's going on? And like it's so funny, man. Like
well,
okay,
it's like Vincent walks in too, and he's just kind of like, what the fuck, and like storms out. Like I think that's a moment where he has like the hardest time like fooling himself into thinking that this is his son, even though he knows that it's not really. We're just like, what the shit? Well, and that ends too with like after they all leave, like she then like goes into. Is it one of the fire? Is it the fire truck?
Fire trucks.
I couldn't remember if it was the fire truck or one of their ambulances, and fucks the truck.
She fucks the truck. Yeah, she fucks the fire truck. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I adore that scene, and it pairs really well with several of the other sequences where she tries to find romantic love again with this father figure character, and they kiss. And there's some other moments, and like where like again it's another like crossing of the wires, and I found it to be like particularly powerful because the film starts out like so powerfully heterosexually gazed. Like even the lesbian sequences, like they almost feel like designed for like, hello cis men, enjoy.
Yeah, sure.
And as the film like shifts, like it almost feels like such a great like, haha, cis men. Like what do you think now? Like, and it's I thought that was really powerful and fun because like even then there are like a lot of those. There are those sort of like incestuous overtones as well, and it's brought around to like but then like those incestuous tones like break societally established like gender normatives, right? And like now it's homoerotic. I wasn't expecting it, and I thought it was really fascinating how like where I can see it like forcing people to draw lines where like they should have been drawing lines well before.
Well,
but I don't know. I'm also like very bi. So like, how did y'all feel about it being like cis hetero men? How did y'all feel? Let's get that.
Well, I think this film is very rich in explorations of identity in ways that I don't feel equipped to talk about.
Yeah,
I want to hear it. I want to hear you talk about it.
All I'll say about that is that, like, I mean, as a cis het man, like I'm comfortable enough in my own sexuality that like this kind of stuff and like homoeroticism does not like bother me. I'm never like skeezed out by it like I think a lot of like hetero men probably are. I will say, which is something that I wanted to bring up anyway, and I think this is a good segue into that, is I went to see this with our friend of the pod, Hannah, who has been on many episodes.
Hell yeah.
I was in Milwaukee and we went to see this at the Classic Downer Theater, which was a very wonderful experience. But I was talking with Hannah after we got out of the movie, and she said that she read the whole film as an allegory for being trans. And that was that was a view that I did not pick up on while watching the movie, and I like Ben, as a cis het man, like I don't feel equipped to like definitively say one way or another like that kind of reading, because just like it's not something that I personally connect with. But
it definitely is the binding, like absolutely.
But here's my argument against that, and this is not like a definitive argument, because like I admit that I do not have the proper perspective to say one way or another. But the reason why I think that this is not necessarily an allegory for being trans is because being trans is about accepting and taking on an identity that you feel like is yourself coming from an identity that is not you, right? Whereas to a degree, whereas this movie feels like she is forcing herself to take on an identity that is distinctly not her own, but seeking acceptance from others.
I see. The thing about there's a lot of that experience. Again, also secondhand, but from how I've been led to understand it, and again, it's different for every individual person, but there is a great deal of like self-discovery in that, it's not always like as binary as like finding like one at not being something and then becoming something, right? Yeah. Like there are often like circumstances where like there is a finding and like a changing of minds. Yeah. As well, and like,
or even just considering yourself as gender non-binary.
And also,
as neither one or the other.
Our character has been forced into a position of normativity. Now, in this case, the normativity is just Homo sapio normativity, right? Culturally, they're in a position. We've been talking about the whole podcast. They're in a position of trying to be normal in the sense of like pursuing relationships with people, but they are drawn to cars.
Right.
And it can very, very easily be shifted into being an allegory about being comfortable with being like
who you are.
Male, female, femme, cis, whatever, like neutral, and being forced into that position and slowly discovering who you are and trying to either like hide it, bind it, put it down, or the opposite, and become who you are by the end of the film. So I think absolutely it still stands. And that's the beauty of like a good allegory, right? Just like with Eraserhead, right? Like there's a lot of texture here, and I think it's all of the things we've been discussing. It can be like about dealing with like incestuous abuse. It can be about like dealing with like other personal traumas. It can be about like just generally sexuality. It can be about gender normativity. It can be about literally about having to deal with like varied traumatic events. There are many ways you can read into these things, and I think they're all by design.
I think that as a whole blanket statement, the film is about struggling with identity and acceptance, and that there are many things under that extremely broad umbrella that you can plug in and read as necessary. Like that's the nice thing about a film like this that is not completely explicit with what it's trying to say. Like, it's saying something, and there are many ways to interpret it based off of your own experience and your own readings. That's one of the things I like about it.
One of the reasons I feel ill-equipped to start examining identity in this film is I think it's very rich, but also on a surface level, it's almost reactionary to an extent. In solely surface level reading, a serial killing woman takes the opposite gender to hide. In a very surface level reading of that, that's very reactionary. That's like a conservative, saying, oh, this evil serial killing man is pretending to be a woman to get away with it. Yeah. Like, on a surface level...
Put this movie next to Sleepaway Camp, see what happens.
There's
some complexities there. You haven't seen that movie, so
that's a discussion for a different day.
But like, I think this movie is much more rich than that surface level reading. Yes. But at the same time, I do not feel like I'm the person to try to explain that. I think I found much more richness in the ideas of codependency and the idea of being taken care for and belonging, and generational trauma.
Yeah, like I said, it's all about identity and acceptance, but how you want to specifically read those things is, I think, very up in the air.
And I think generational trauma is one of the most rich elements of the movie for me, and I think it really emphasizes itself in the final scene when she gives birth.
Yes.
She gives birth to this sort of metal baby. And one of the most explicit and focused elements of this baby is it has sort of a metal rod spine, and it's very evocative of one of the first scenes of the film when we see her coming out of surgery, where she has the metal fused spine as she's recovering. And I see that rhyming element in the film as well. It's a motif, of intergenerational trauma, of that trauma being passed down from one generation to the other. And we also, I don't mean to undercut. We also see that generational trauma in the way our main firefighter is projecting his own traumas onto.
Well, I actually read the ending of the film quite optimistically. I feel, because it feels like a literal moment of rebirth to me. Like, when you're looking at it from the perspective of, a dissociative fantasy, like, Alexia dies in childbirth as, like, Vincent is coaching her through it.
Her old self is dead.
But yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I do think this is all in her head, and it's like, you say, oh, well, she dies at the end, so how can it be in her head? Well, it's not a literal death. It's an ego death. Yes. It is the death of her old self giving birth to something new, giving birth to, because what happens is, as she dies, like, Vincent takes the baby and, like, cradles it and says, like, I'm here for you. I'll always be here for you. He has lost a son for which Alexia became a temporary surrogate, but by the end of the movie, through her own death, she has given birth to her new self, which is literally a new child for Vincent to raise as his own.
See, I saw that as codependency and sharing of trauma in a lot of ways.
I don't think that's wrong. I think it's definitely
both.
I think it's both. But it feels optimistic to me, because, like, for so much of the second half of the movie, like, she is trying to, like, physically bind down who she was to be this person that Vincent wants her to be, because she seeks the love and acceptance. And yeah, it is codependency and a sharing of trauma. Like, yeah, that's what brings them together. But by the end, she is able to fully kill off the old self that she seeks to discard, and is able to bring in her new self as what Vincent needs her to be. It is codependent.
Here's the cool part about it. It is, we cut to credits right when we're left with the, like, just a spinning top of whether codependency has become co-support, right? Like, when, and it basically asking the question, when is that, right? When does codependency become co-support? And it can't, and I don't think that question needs to be answered here on the podcast or, like, by the film, but it is a cool question, and I think the answer is, like, neither nor or either or, and it can, like, it is, it's a messy soup, much like the movie, but like, there, that is the nature of, like,
it's an ending that I find very sweet for very strange and unique reasons. Yes. It feels like, in a lot of ways, it's their shared trauma. It's a child. It's an encapsulation of a child that is missing.
It's a child born of their shared trauma.
And it's also metal and cars and that trauma on the other side.
And like there are, like, the connotations to, like, societally of like abominations. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ, like, so many like horror works, like abominations through incest as well, and whatnot, and the fact that, like, they are in, like, this surrogate role of father and son, and then we have, like, the other additionals of, like, father and daughter, like, at the beginning, and, like, again, like, hiding a pregnancy and, like, the shame in that, all again coming into play here, as then he sort of becomes the father through her, like there is a great deal of that, and also, like, taking that shame out of light, and again becoming, like, almost bringing good out of that is also, like, really deeply conflicted, right? Like, and worthy of much deeper discussion. But there is so much in that. And two, like, why, well, also, like, we talk about like climactic events and whatnot. Again, like, yeah, the movie does start with, like, the girl already angry at the father, you know?
Yeah.
Like, as a child, like, there is something there, and, like, that we see a what is likely, especially implied by, like, the rest of the non-literal events, a non-literal impact of a moment, right? Like, whereas, like, the moment could have been something much worse before that.
Yeah.
And it's all brought around, like, full circle by the ending. And I think that this is, frankly, like, the best way, like, to approach these sorts of topics, like, through allegory in film. Just for me, I find it to be like one of the best ways to, like, approach these things, like, in a safe environment, like, through, like, discussion over, like, a fantasy, you know, like, film. And it is one of the perfect examples of why horror is so important.
Absolutely.
You know, as a genre, because, like, other genres can't necessarily aren't really given the tools to talk about these sorts of things. Wow, it's hard, it's heavy, but by talking about these sorts of things, we can better, like, come to terms with them.
Absolutely.
And understand them, and in ways that, again, like, aren't necessarily allowed by other genres. And it can be very hard to take in, and not for everybody too. You know, also,
No,
like,
no,
and
no.
not everyone, I don't think, needs to and should or whatever. Like,
I would broadly say that, like, this movie is probably not for, like, the general average movie-going public. I think that it's a little too vague and a little too weird and disturbing for, like, most people who are just looking to go into a movie for a good time. Like, this is a deeply strange and thought-provoking film, but one that demands that you spend a lot of its runtime being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
And, like, if you're not into being uncomfortable, like, if you don't like being uncomfortable watching a movie, this movie is not for you. In the same way that Raw isn't. It's like, if you don't like discomfort, avoid this movie.
And I think,
You know?
I think, to sum it up, like, this film provides a space you can talk about these issues.
Yeah, totally.
You know, like, and I think it's important for us to do that.
Well,
to learn.
I think
and
a lot
grow.
of important reflection comes from being uncomfortable and, like, trying to unpack, like, why you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like, I think that those kinds of emotions very much facilitate, like, introspection. And that's what I like about Julia Ducornau as a filmmaker. Like, this is only her second film, which is fucking wild.
Insane.
Especially considering, like, how much of a banger Raw already is, and, like, then this following it up. It's like, she is a filmmaker with a very clear vision of like, I'm going to force you to be uncomfortable, but you're going to learn something from it.
Right.
You know?
It is never once discomfort for the sake of it. It is never apropos of nothing. Like, there is always something there to it. And
it's never for shock value. Like, it's trying to say something, and in so doing, it's going to force you to bear witness to a lot of things that are going to make you feel icky.
Yeah.
You know?
Which again brings us full circle to our big jump starting event with the car fucking. Right? This movie, like, activated me, and then it forced me to think about things that would immediately deactivate me, you know? Like, and I respect the fuck out of this movie for that. To go into all of these topics that would, like, personally force me, like, out of that scenario, but it often forces many people in, is an incredible way to, like, extend the bridge there. You know, like, is to reach across the aisle. And, yeah, I can't give it enough praise.
Well, why don't you throw a rating on that?
5.
We've gone very long on this.
5. We're going into 5th gear on this movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay, 5 for Cleve. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I find this movie incredibly rich and, you know, unique. It feels like an incredible blend of Cronenberg and Tsukamoto, you know, Tetsuo, and Claire Denis. Even I feel like there's a lot of similarities
For
with
sure.
this, and like Beau Travail,
Good call. Good
and
pull on
you
Claire
know,
Denis.
desire and longing. Very rich movie. It's all about family, and all I can say is girls get it done. I'm gonna give it a strong 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, this is one where I've kind of struggled on my rating a little bit, just because like for me it comes down to like, where do I put this in comparison to Raw? And Raw is a film that I have seen many times at this point, and I've had a lot of time to think on it and analyze it, and like so much of my love for that film has come out of repeated viewings and like time to process it. And I think that this film will be the same, but at this point I've only seen it once, so there's still a lot of unpacking to be done. For the moment, I'm going to give it a very strong 4.5 out of 5, but this is absolutely the kind of movie that I think give me another viewing or two, and it will likely be bumped up to a 5.
I think alone, like, giving you that much to process and think about it, like, is a feat. Like, it's
in the position where, like, Ben, if you had given it a 5, I would have gone ahead and bumped mine up to 5 so it could be unanimous. But if you're feeling a strong 4.5 out of 5 on it, it's like, yeah, that's really where I'm at this moment too. But you know, like I said, another viewing or two, and I could easily see this being a 5.
I think this is a movie much like Near Dark, where on a certain day, if it hits me, it would be a 5.
Yeah. I'm the same. I think
it's hard to say.
Like Raw was like a really heavy movie for me, and I came out of it being like, wow, I need time to process this, but I don't want to watch it again for a long time because like it hit me so hard. But for reason, even though I said like this movie like has the scenes of like the hardest hitting moments of Raw, I'm still like drawn back to it again, and I'm like, I want to watch this movie again. But with both of these films, I felt the need, even like after the podcast and like talking about them in ad nauseum, I still felt the need, and have been feeling the need since I watched Titane, Titane or whatever, to talk about it. Like I need to like process it and unravel it, and for a movie to give me that much sustenance is just so gratifying. I mean, there have been, you know, like 500 page, you know, like plus, you know, page books that have given me way less to think about and talk about. And and just to summarize all that in 2 hours, I just 2 hours is
and I will say I was infamously the most lukewarm of the three of us on Raw. Like, I think it's a good movie, but I don't find it to be a masterpiece. I think the grounding of it kind of stretches my suspension of disbelief, where I feel like with this film I got a lot more out of it because it was more explicitly surreal, and I think this is an incredibly strong film and one that will stick with me.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Well, that gives Titane an average from the three of us of 4.7 out of 5 pods. If you've sat through this and it sounds appealing to you and you haven't seen it, check it out. Don't know if it's still in theaters. Probably not.
Maybe in a second run.
That's true. Depending on where you live, you might be able to catch this. But otherwise, check it out. It's fucking great. Well, we've run very long, so we'll keep the end proceedings pretty short. Next week, we don't know yet. There's a couple possibilities for the next episode.
We'll be watching a new movie.
It will definitively be a new movie. There are a couple of options. We have some scheduling conundrums that need to be worked out. So next week it'll be a new movie.
Stay tuned for a mystery.
Stay tuned. It could be one of a couple of things.
But it will be a thing.
Real quick, sponsor time.
Oh, real quick. We got a speed sponsor this week. Okay, here we go.
What we got?
All right, and this week is brought to you by Crammy Handelmans, Hammy Crandlemans, Crammy Handelmans, Hammy Crandlemans. Can you cram the ham with Hammy Crandle Cram Ham? It's time to slam and ham that Crandle man. There you go.
Well, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode.
Come on and slam. You get it. You get it.
We get it.
We got it.
That'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps more than you can know to help bump us up in the numbers and get us in more people's ears. And it only takes a few seconds of your time. So if you haven't done so, please do so. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. If you want to support us with a monthly subscription, there's a few different tiers for you to subscribe to. Thanks to our honorary pod boys, Sam Simon and Sarah Morris. We love and appreciate y'all as always. You can follow us on Twitter at podpeoplepod, and check out our Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. Check it out. I'm on Twitter at some spooky snake.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studio. I need to tweet today. It's Saturday.
Not when this comes out, it's not.
No, but as of right now, it's screenshot Saturday, and I need to hit that.
Do it!
And then, because you're tweeting for Light Arc Studios, we put up progress on It Stares Back. Stay tuned. And also working at Dread XP. Go check us out. We've got a ton of amazing games in the works right now, and coming up very soon is going to be our spooky showcase. Go check out Dread XP on Twitter and see some of the cool stuff that's going on there. Like all the cool games. I mean, there are so many. There's like Dread Delusion, My Friendly Neighborhood, Spookware, Sucker for Love. Oh my god, like so many like super cool games. Hey, speaking of feeling deeply uncomfortable about fucking a fire truck, you want to feel the same way about Cthulhu? Go check out Sucker for Love. Oh my god, I haven't given Sucker for Love enough love. Oh my god, yeah, like go check that out. It's coming soon. That's it for me.
Yep, that's it for all of us. I'm about to go hop in the fucking whip, chop top, drop top, vroom vroom, beep beep.
Lavender Lamborghini, roll up in a blue bikini. Bitches on the beaches looking super cute and freaky. All my friends are princesses, we keep it whipped and creamy. Ice cubes on our tongues because we like to keep it freezy. Lavender Lamborghini, get out on the right side. Chauffeur stayed at home because my girl wanted to ride. Licking lips and tasting plush, I'm feeling so alive. Wanna take it to the highway, come on, let's go for a drive. All my life, I've been waiting for a good time, a good time. Let me ride, all my life, I've been waiting for a good time, a good time. So let me ride, let me ride, all my life, I've been waiting for a good time. So let's ride. Bitches know they can't catch me. Cute, sexy, in my ride, sporty. Those slugs know they can't catch me. Beep beep. So let's ride. Bitches know they can't catch me. Cute, sexy, in my ride, sporty. Those slugs know they can't catch me. Beep beep. So let's ride, let's ride.